Camille Ashford lifted the car keys high off the silver tray, dangled them over 200 of the wealthiest people in the state, and then flung them across the marble floor, straight at the one man in a grease-stained jacket. "Charity for the working man," she called out, and the laughter came like a wave. The rusted heap in the estate driveway was a joke, and Isaiah Turner was the punchline. But he didn't flinch. He walked over, knelt, picked up the keys, and said 6 quiet words that pulled the smile clean off her face. Because that junk was hiding a $9 million secret and a truth about her own father she was never meant to find. Before we start Drop the City, you're watching from in the comments, so I can see how far this story travels, and if you believe a patient man's day always comes, hit subscribe and stay with me to the very end. Isaiah Turner almost didn't get out of the truck. He sat in the long circular driveway of the Ashford estate, with his hands still on the wheel engine ticking as it cooled, and watched a valet in a white glove wave a Bentley forward like he was directing a jet onto a runway. The house in front of him wasn't a house. It was a monument. Limestone, the color of old bone windows, tall as church doors. A fountain out front spitting water lit up gold and blue. "You gonna sit here all night?" Reggie Dawson leaned in through the passenger window, straightening a bow tie that was slightly crooked and a little too shiny. "Come on, man. I called in a favor to get you on this list." "I know you did." So maybe you shouldn't have." Reggie opened the door and got in halfway, 1 foot still on the pavement. "Isaiah, look at me. You've been in that garage 12-13 hours a day. When's the last time you put on a decent shirt and stood somewhere that wasn't covered in motor oil?" "Dana's funeral," Isaiah said. The words landed hard the way they always did. Reggie went quiet. He'd known Dana too. Everybody in the neighborhood had. "That's exactly why," Reggie said, finally gentler now. "You need to be around living people. Rich, ridiculous, tone-deaf people, sure. But living. And there's money in that house, brother. Some of these folks collect classic cars like other people collect stamps. You shake 3 hands tonight, one of them breaks down next month, and guess who they call? They're not gonna call me." "They might. That's more than you got sitting home." Isaiah looked down at his own hands. Clean for once. He'd scrubbed them for 20 minutes that afternoon, and there was still a shadow of grease worked into the creases of his knuckles that no soap on earth was ever going to lift. 43 years old. A jacket he'd bought second-hand and pressed himself. A 10-year-old boy at home with a neighbor lady who charged him $15 for the evening he didn't really have. "Micah okay?" Reggie asked, reading his face. "Mrs. Alvarez has him. He's doing that model engine kit I got him. He'll be fine." Isaiah exhaled. "I just don't like leaving him. 2 hours, in and out. You'll be home before his bedtime." Isaiah killed the engine. 2 hours. 2 hours. Reggie grinned. "And try to smile at somebody. You got that face like you're about to tell a man his transmission's gone. Sometimes it is gone. Not tonight, it isn't. Tonight nothing's broke. Come on." Inside, the ceiling went up forever. There was a string quartet in the corner playing something soft and pretty that nobody was listening to. Waiters slid through the crowd carrying trays of little food that looked like art and probably tasted like air. And everywhere, there were people who did not look at Isaiah so much as look around him the way you'd step around a puddle without acknowledging that it was there. He'd expected that. He told himself he'd expected that. It still sat wrong in his chest. "Champagne, sir." A waiter at least treated him like a guest. "I'm all right. Thank you, though. Long night ahead." Reggie had already been swallowed into a knot of men in matching navy blazers laughing at something. Isaiah drifted toward the wall, found a spot near a marble column, and did the thing he always did in rooms like this. He made himself small, and he watched. He was good at watching. It was the whole job, really. People thought being a mechanic was about wrenches and torque. It wasn't. It was about listening to what a thing was telling you and believing it even when the owner swore up and down it was fine. "I don't recognize you." A woman had appeared at his elbow, silver-haired, draped in something that probably cost more than his truck. "Are you with one of the foundations?" "No, ma'am. I'm a guest," Reggie Dawson brought me. Reggie. She said the name like she was tasting it and wasn't sure about it. And what is it you do? I'm a mechanic. I own a garage over on Fenwick and 3rd. Oh. A small closed sound. How interesting. And she was already turning, already floating away towards someone worth her time. The word interesting left hanging in the air like a bad smell. Isaiah let out a breath through his nose. 2 hours. He looked at his watch. 11 minutes down. Don't let Eleanor Vance get to you, said a voice beside him. A younger man, this time 30s, holding his champagne like a prop he'd forgotten he had. She's descended from a shipping fortune, and she'll remind you of it within 4 minutes of any conversation. What'd you say you did? Mechanic. Ah. The man's smile flickered recalibrated. Cars. That's honest work. My grandfather always said that, honest work. He said it the way people said things they'd never once had to think about. You here for the auction then? The car thing. What car thing? Camille's got some old wreck out back she's making a whole production of. Part of the charity angle. She does it every year, finds the most ridiculous thing and turns it into a bit. Last year it was a stuffed moose. He laughed. You'll see. She's a riot. Camille. Ashford, our host. Well, it was her father's estate. Edward Ashford. He passed 2 years back. Camille runs the foundation now. The man leaned in a little. Between us, she's got more money than God and half the personality. But she throws a hell of a party. He raised his glass to nobody and drifted off, leaving Isaiah alone against his column again. Edward Ashford. Isaiah knew the name the way everybody knew it. Ashford Motors. Ashford. This, Ashford, that, on buildings and stadiums and the sides of buses. The man had been dead 2 years, and he still owned half the skyline. Isaiah checked his watch again. He was going to give it the full 2 hours because he'd told Reggie he would, and he was a man who did the things he said he'd do. But he'd already decided somewhere deep down that he did not belong here, and that the sooner he could get back to his boy and his garage and his own life, the better. He had no idea that in 40 minutes this room would humiliate him in front of 200 strangers, and he had even less idea that it was the best thing that ever happened to him. The lights dimmed. A spotlight found the top of a grand staircase, and Camille Ashford came down it like she'd been born to be looked at. She was younger than Isaiah expected, mid-30s, maybe in a dress the deep red of a stoplight, moving with the practiced ease of a woman who had never once in her life waited for a room to quiet down, because rooms quieted down for her. She smiled at the crowd, and the crowd smiled back, and there was something in it that made Isaiah's shoulders tighten without him knowing why. Friends, she said, and her voice carried without a microphone. Family, and the 3 people my accountant made me invite, you know who you are. Laughter. Warm, easy hers. Every year, she went on gliding to the center of the room where a small platform had been set up. The Ashford Foundation raises money for causes that matter. Education, the arts. Getting my cousin Douglas into rehab again. More laughter. A red-faced man somewhere raised his glass and shouted, "Third time's the charm, Cammy. We're all rooting for you, Doug." She let the wave crest and settle. But you didn't come here to write checks in silence. You came here to be entertained, and I would hate to disappoint you. She snapped her fingers. 2 men in coveralls, actual coveralls. The theatrical kind, too clean to have ever done a day's work, rolled something in through the wide double doors at the far end of the hall. It was a car, or it had been once. Isaiah straightened off his column before he even realized he was doing it. The thing was a wreck. There was no other word for it. Rust had eaten through the fenders in brown lace. The paint, whatever color it had once been, had oxidized to a chalky gray-green, blistered and cracked. One headlight was gone entirely, a black socket staring out like a missing tooth. The tires were flat, cracked, sun-rotted. It sat low and sad on a rolling platform, and the crowd, seeing it, began to laugh before Camille said a single word. "I know," Camille said, holding up a hand, pressing her lips together to keep from laughing herself. "I know. Now, some background. When Daddy passed, he left me the estate, the foundation, the company, and this." She gestured at the wreck with an open palm like a game show host, revealing the worst possible prize. This was in the back of the fourth garage under a tarp behind a stack of paint cans, where I can only assume he was hiding it out of shame. The crowd howled. "We had it appraised." She went on, savoring it now. "Do you want to know what it's worth?" The very generous estimate from a man I'm fairly sure felt sorry for me was $400. As scrap people. My father built engines that put men on the highway, and this is what he was tinkering with in his spare time. A $400 embarrassment. Isaiah had stopped listening to her. He was looking at the car. Because from where he stood 40 feet away in bad light past a crowd of laughing millionaires, something about it was wrong. Not wrong like broken. He knew broken. Broken was his whole life. Wrong, like it didn't match itself. The body was a disaster, sure. But the proportions of the thing, the low sweep of the hood, the way the wheelbase sat, the angle where the roofline dropped, that wasn't a junker. Junkers were ugly by neglect. This was ugly on top of something that had been once very deliberately, very expensively beautiful. He took a step forward without meaning to. "So here's what we're going to do," Camille was saying. "In the spirit of charity, in the spirit of giving." She was scanning the crowd now, and Isaiah felt it the way you feel a cloud pass over the sun, a change in the light, a cooling. Her eyes moved over the men in blazers, over the silver-haired women, over the champagne, and the tuxedos hunting. And they found him. The one man in a second-hand jacket. The one man with grease still ghosted into his knuckles. The one man who right at that moment was leaning toward the wreck instead of laughing at it. Something sparked in her expression. Not cruelty exactly. Something worse, maybe sport. "You, sir," Camille said and pointed. "The gentleman by the column. In thee is that a mechanic's build. You look like a man who knows his way around an engine." The whole room turned. 200 faces. Isaiah felt the heat climb his neck. "I do some," he said, just loud enough. "He does some." Camille grinned, delighted. "What's your name, friend?" "Isaiah Turner." "Isaiah Turner." She rolled it out for the crowd. "And you fix cars for a living, Isaiah Turner?" "I own a garage. Yes, ma'am." "You own a garage." She pressed a hand to her chest as if moved. "This is perfect. This is fate. Come here, Isaiah. Come on. Don't be shy, you're among friends." A pause, a wicked little tilt of the head. "Well, you're among us." The crowd tittered at the correction. Isaiah did not move for a moment. He was aware of Reggie somewhere off to his left. Aware of the horror creeping onto his friend's face. Aware that whatever was about to happen, Reggie had not seen it coming and would be sick about it later. He was aware of the 200 people and the wreck and the woman in red who had decided in the space of a heartbeat to make him the entertainment. He could turn around. He could walk out. He had every right, but he thought about Micah. About the $15 he'd handed Mrs. Alvarez. About the electric bill and the invoice from the parts supplier, and the way his boy looked at him like he could fix anything in the world. And he thought, "If I run now, I taught him you run." So he walked. Across the marble, through the parting crowd, into the light. Up close, the car was worse and better both. Worse because he could see just how far gone the body was. Better because now close, he could see the bones of it, and the bones were extraordinary. "There he is." Camille beamed at him like they were old friends. "Isaiah Turner, everyone a real working, honest-to-God mechanic. Give him a hand." They clapped. It was not a kind sound. It was the sound of people applauding a dog for doing a trick. "Now, Isaiah." Camille lifted a small silver tray from a nearby table. On it, a single set of keys. Old ones tarnished on a cracked leather fob. "I've had the most wonderful idea. I can't sell this thing. I can't even give it away. I tried, the museum said no. The scrapyard quoted me for the tow." A ripple of laughter. "But you could use it, couldn't you? For parts, for whatever you people do. So." She lifted the keys off the tray and held them up high, catching the light. "In front of all these witnesses, As an act of pure, generous charity, I'm giving it to you." Isaiah looked at the keys, looked at her. "I appreciate that," he said carefully. "But I don't need charity, ma'am." "Oh, don't be proud." She waved the objection away. "Everybody needs a little charity now and then. It's what tonight's all about. Isn't it, everyone? Charity," someone called, and it caught on a scatter of voices half drunk and thrilled to be part of the joke. And then Camille Ashford did the thing that Isaiah Turner would remember for the rest of his life. She smiled at him, wide, radiant camera ready, and instead of handing him the keys, she cocked her arm back and threw them. "Charity for the working man," she cried. The keys sailed over the crowd. They hit the marble floor 8 feet from him and skidded spinning, coming to rest against the base of a column. And the room erupted. 200 of the richest people in the state laughing, really laughing. Bent over, drink-sloshing hand on the arm of a friend, laughing. At the keys on the floor. At the wreck. At the black mechanic in the second-hand jacket standing alone in the spotlight while the woman in red basked in at arms, spread drinking it in. Reggie was pushing forward through the crowd now, face like thunder, but Isaiah caught his eye and gave one small shake of the head. "Don't!" Because here was the thing about Isaiah Turner that Camille Ashford did not know, that none of them knew. He had been laughed at before. He'd been laughed at by the loan officer who took one look at him and found a reason to say no. By the customers who came into his shop and asked with a little smirk whether there was somebody else who could look at their car. By the man at the auto parts counter who talked to him slow like he was simple. He knew this laughter. He'd swum in it his whole life. And a long time ago he had learned the only thing that ever took the power out of it. You don't give it your anger. Anger is what they're fishing for. Anger is the trick working. Anger is you doing the dance they set up for you. So Isaiah Turner did not get angry. He walked slow and unhurried across the marble. The laughter began to falter as he moved, because he wasn't storming out, and he wasn't shouting, and he wasn't crumpling, and none of those were what they'd bet on. He reached the column. He crouched down. He picked up the keys off the floor, turned them over, once in his hand, feeling the weight of them, the old leather of the fob soft and cracked between his fingers. Then he stood, and the room, without quite knowing why, went quiet. Camille was still smiling, but it had gone a half-degree uncertain at the edges. "There," she said, filling the silence. "You see, everybody wins. You've got yourself a project." Isaiah looked at the keys. Then he looked at the car. He walked around the front of it slow, and the crowd's eyes followed him, and he ran one hand clean for once, but not for long, along the ruined edge of the hood. He felt the line of it, the curve. He crouched by the front wheel and looked underneath at the frame, at the shape of things that no scrapyard car had any business having. His heart was doing something strange. "Well," Camille called, and there was a brightness in her voice, now that was working a little too hard. "Any thoughts, Mr. Turner? Should we call the scrapyard for you, or—" Isaiah stood up. He looked at her. He held up the keys. "I'd like to look her over," he said. 6 words, quiet ones. The kind of thing a man says over a hood in a garage. Not the kind of thing you say to a billionaire in a red dress in front of 200 people. But something in the way he said them, flat, certain, unbothered, landed in the room like a dropped glass. Camille's smile faltered for real this time. "I'm sorry. I said I'd like to look her over. Properly. Not here." Isaiah's voice was even. "You said you're giving it to me. That true? In front of all these witnesses, like you said." The question hung there, and Isaiah watched with something close to fascination as Camille Ashford realized she was trapped by her own performance. She'd made it a public gift. A whole bit about generosity, about charity, about the working man. She could not now, in front of 200 people, take it back. To take it back would be to admit the joke was cruelty and nothing else. "Of course," she said, and the laugh she gave was a beat too late. "Of course it's true. It's yours, Mr. Turner. Enjoy your treasure." "Thank you." Isaiah closed his hand around the keys. "I mean that. Thank you." And that was the part that unsettled her most, though she couldn't have said so that he meant it. There was no sarcasm in it. No wounded pride disguised as courtesy. He'd said thank you the way a man says it when he's just been handed something he actually wants. For one strange second, Camille Ashford looked at the wreck she'd been mocking for 10 minutes. And then she looked at the calm man holding the keys to it, and a small, cold question moved through her that she immediately dismissed. Why does he look pleased? She shook it off. She turned back to her crowd, threw her arms wide, and the party rolled on over the top of it like water closing over a stone. But Isaiah Turner didn't hear the rest of what she said. He was crouched by the car again, running his fingertips along a seam near the wheel well, where the rust had flaked away. And underneath it, under the ruin, under the neglect, under 2 decades of somebody's shame, his fingers found metalwork so fine, so precise, so deliberate, that his breath actually caught in his throat. Reggie found him 15 minutes later out in the driveway, standing beside the wreck where the coverall men had wheeled it after Camille was done with it. Somebody had already produced paperwork, a hastily printed transfer form, the foundation's lawyer smirking as he handed Isaiah a pen, treating the whole thing as a comedy, right up until Isaiah read every line before signing it. Isaiah. Reggie's voice was tight. Isaiah, man, I am so sorry. I had no idea she was gonna. I never would have brought you if I thought that was foul. That was straight up foul what she did. It's all right. It is not all right. Reggie was shaking. The way she throwing the keys like you were a dog, Isaiah. 200 people. I wanted to walk up there and... I know. I saw. Thank you for not. Isaiah didn't look up. He was on one knee by the front of the car, holding out his phone flashlight, staring at something under the wheel arch. Reggie, come here a second. What? Come here, look at this. Reggie crouched beside him, confused, following the beam of light. Look at what? It's a rusty car. Look at the frame, right there. See where the rusts come off. Yeah, you see how the metal's shaped. You see those channels there running along the rail. Reggie squinted. I mean, I guess... What am I looking at? Isaiah sat back on his heel. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed. Something had come into it, low and careful. The voice of a man who does not want to say a thing too soon in case saying it out loud makes it stop being true. You don't do that to a production car, Isaiah said. You don't spend that kind of labor. That's hand-formed. Somebody stood at a bench and made that by hand on purpose, one piece at a time. You don't do that for something you're building to sell. You do that for something you're building to matter. Isaiah. Reggie looked at him. What are you saying? Isaiah stood up slowly. He looked back at the great lit-up house, at the windows full of laughing people, at the woman in the red dress somewhere inside who thought she'd made a fool of him. I'm saying, Isaiah said, that a man like Edward Ashford didn't hide a $400 piece of scrap under a tarp behind the paint cans for 20 years. He put his clean hand, dirty now, streaked with rust, flat on the ruined hood. He hid something he didn't want anybody to find. Reggie stared at him. You think? I don't think anything yet. Isaiah pulled his hand back, turned and started walking toward his truck to figure out how in the world he was going to tow the thing home. That's the whole point. You don't think. You look. And then you believe what she's telling you, even when nobody else will. He stopped. Looked back at the wreck sitting there in the drive, sad and rusted and forgotten, worth $400, to a man who felt sorry for a billionaire. And this one, Isaiah Turner said quiet to himself, as much as anyone, she's got a whole lot to tell me. He climbed into his truck, and his hands were shaking just slightly on the wheel, not from anger, not from the humiliation, not from any of what Camille Ashford had done to him in that beautiful, terrible room, but from something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. He backed the truck up to the wreck, got out, and went looking for a chain. It took Isaiah 2 tries and a borrowed dolly to get the wreck up onto the flatbed, and by the time he'd chained it down and driven the 40 minutes back across town to his garage on Fenwick and 3rd, it was nearly midnight and the whole city had gone quiet. He didn't take it inside right away. He backed the flatbed up to the bay doors, killed the engine, and just sat there in the dark with his hands on the wheel, the way he'd sat in the Ashford driveway hours ago. Except now, his heart was doing something different. Now it was going fast and low, the way it went when he opened up an engine and found something that made no sense. He should go get Micah. He should thank Mrs. Alvarez and carry his boy home and put him to bed. That was the responsible thing. Instead, he texted her, "Sorry so late. You mind if he sleeps over? I'll pick him up first thing and pay you double." The reply came back in under a minute. "He's already out on my couch, snoring like a grown man." "Go do your thing, Isaiah. Whatever's got you texting me at midnight." He smiled at that. Mrs. Alvarez had known him 20 years. She'd known Dana. She knew when a thing had a hold of him. He got out, rolled up the bay door, and turned on every light in the shop. Under the fluorescence, the car looked even worse than it had at the estate. Every flaw the dim gold party light had softened was now laid out cruel and plain. The cancer of rust chewing up the rocker panels, the sun-blistered paint, the empty eye of the missing headlight. Anybody walking in off the street would have seen $400 of scrap, same as the appraiser had. Same as Camille Ashford had. But Isaiah didn't look at cars the way other people did. He got the wreck winched down off the flatbed and rolled onto the lift, and he stood there a long while just looking at the shape of it. Then he got down on the creeper, slid underneath, and turned his light up into the guts of the thing. "Okay," he said softly to nobody to the car. "Talk to me." He was under there almost an hour before he came out, and when he did, he wasn't the same man who'd gone under. He sat on the creeper in the middle of his own shop floor with his knees up and his elbows on them and his hands hanging loose, and he stared at the underside of that car like it had said something to him in a language he only half understood. The frame was hand-built. He'd known that at the estate, but under here it wasn't a guess anymore, it was a fact you could put your fingers on. The rails weren't stamped. They were form-shaped by hand, welded by hand, the welds so fine, and even they looked almost machined, except no machine of the era it was pretending to be from could have laid a bead like that. There were mounting points for things he didn't recognize. Channels cut for wiring that ran in ways no wiring had any business running. And the suspension geometry, he'd lain there for 20 minutes just looking at the suspension geometry, because it was decades ahead of anything that should have been bolted to a chassis wearing that much rust. "You're not old," he said out loud. "You're pretending to be old." He got up, wiped his hands on a rag out of pure habit, though they were already black, and went to the workbench and picked up his phone. It was past 1 in the morning. He scrolled to a number he hadn't called in 3 years, a number he'd almost deleted a dozen times, and his thumb hovered over it. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, retired professor, automotive historian. The man had brought a car into Isaiah's shop years back, a beautiful, temperamental old thing that 4 other shops had given up on, and Isaiah had gotten it running when nobody else could, and the old man had never forgotten it. They'd stayed in touch for a while, traded a few emails. Then life had done what life does, and the emails stopped. Isaiah told himself it was too late to call. He told himself he'd call in the morning. Then he thought about the frame under that car, and he pressed the button. It rang 4 times. He was about to hang up when a voice answered, dry and unhurried, and not at all sleepy, the voice of an old man who kept his own hours. "Whoever this is," Nathaniel Brooks said, "you're either dying or you've found something. Which is it?" Isaiah let out a breath that was half a laugh. "Dr. Brooks, it's Isaiah Turner, from the garage on Fenwick. I worked on your—" "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Turner. You're the only living human being who ever got that Delahaye to idle without stalling, and I have thought about you fondly and often. It is 1 o'clock in the morning, so I'll ask again." A pause. "Which is it, dying or found something?" "Found something?" Isaiah said. I don't want to say too much. I could be wrong. I probably am." "You're not wrong," Brooks said it flatly. "In the 20-odd years I've known men who work on cars for a living, the ones who call at 1 in the morning saying I could be wrong are the ones who are never wrong. The ones who are wrong call at noon very sure of themselves. What have you got?" Isaiah looked at the wreck on the lift. "I've got a car somebody gave me tonight as a joke. Told me it was worth $400 as scrap. It's got a hand-built frame, a suspension setup I've never seen on anything from the era it's dressed as, and mounting points I can't identify. and it was hidden under a tarp behind a stack of paint cans for the last 20 years by a man who could have sold it for a fortune if it was anything worth selling. The line was quiet for a moment. "Say the name of the man," Brooks said, and there was something new in his voice, something careful. "Why, say it." "Edward Ashford," Isaiah said. "It came out of the Ashford estate." The silence that followed was so long that Isaiah looked at his phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Dr. Brooks, I'm here?" The old man's voice had gone strange and thick. "I'm here, Isaiah. Just give me a moment. I'm an old man, and you've said something I did not expect to hear before I died." A breath. "Do you have any idea what you might have out there in your shop?" "No, sir. That's why I'm calling you at 1 in the morning. Don't move it. Don't clean it. Don't do anything to it. Don't so much as breathe on it wrong." Brooks was talking fast now, the sleep long gone out of him. "I'll be there when the sun's up. Text me the address. And Isaiah." "Yes, sir. Don't tell a soul. Not one. Not your wife. Not your best friend. Not the man at the counter. Nobody. Do you understand me?" Isaiah looked at the car. "My wife passed Dr. Brooks 3 years ago." The old man's voice softened all at once, the urgency draining out of it into something gentler. "I'm sorry, son. I didn't know." "It's all right. You couldn't have. I'll be there at 7. A pause. "Get some sleep." "I don't think I'm gonna sleep." "No," Brooks said. "No, I don't imagine you are. Neither am I now. Damn you for that." But there was a smile in it. 7 o'clock, Isaiah. The line went dead. Isaiah set the phone down on the bench and looked at the car for a long time. Then he pulled a stool over, sat down in front of it, and did the thing he'd been putting off since the estate. He took the keys out of his pocket, the tarnished keys on the cracked leather fob, the ones Camille Ashford had thrown across a marble floor, while 200 people laughed, and he turned them over in his hand. There was something scratched into the leather of the fob. He hadn't noticed it before in the noise and the light. He held it up under the fluorescence and squinted. 2 letters worn nearly smooth. A-H, not E-A, not Edward Ashford. A-H. "Now who," Isaiah said quietly, "are you?" Nathaniel Brooks arrived at 6:45 in a car that was itself probably worth more than Isaiah's whole shop, moving faster than any 80-year-old man had a right to move, with a leather satchel under one arm and a look on his face like a man walking into church. He didn't say hello. He walked past Isaiah, past the coffee Isaiah had made, straight to the lift, and he stopped in front of the wreck and just looked at it. For a full minute, he didn't say anything at all. Then he set his satchel down on the floor very carefully, took a pair of reading glasses out of his breast pocket, put them on, and leaned in close to the ruined hood. "Oh," he said softly. "Oh, you clever, clever old bastard." "Dr. Brooks, quiet a moment, son." Brooks ran one trembling finger along the same seam near the wheel well that Isaiah had found at the estate. "Where's the frame? Show me the frame." Isaiah put it up on the lift, and Brooks went under with a flashlight, an 80-year-old man on a creeper, and Isaiah heard him make a sound down there that was almost a sob. When he came out, his eyes were wet. "Do you know what this is?" Brooks said. It wasn't quite a question. "No, sir. I was hoping you'd tell me." Brooks pulled the stool over and sat down heavily like his legs had gone. He took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose and sat there a moment, gathering himself, and when he spoke his voice was unsteady. "In 1963, he said, there was a man named Augustus Hale." A-H, Isaiah thought. His scalp prickled. Augustus Hale was the most gifted automotive engineer of his generation, and almost nobody has ever heard of him. And I'll tell you why in a minute. He worked for a small design outfit that got swallowed up by a bigger one, that got swallowed up by Ashford Motors, back when Edward Ashford was building his empire one acquisition at a time. And somewhere in all that swallowing, Edward Ashford got his hands on Augustus Hale. Brooks looked at the car. Hale had an idea, an impossible idea for 1963, a car that was decades ahead of anything on the road. Suspension aerodynamics materials, An engine concept people wouldn't take seriously for another 30 years. He built one. Exactly one. A running prototype. And then what? And then he vanished. Brooks spread his hands. Both of them in a manner of speaking. Hale had a falling out with Ashford. Nobody ever knew the details. There were rumors, there always are, and he walked away from the company, and he died a few years later, poor and forgotten, and the prototype was never seen again. For 60 years, the story of the Hale prototype has been a ghost story that old men like me tell each other at conventions. Half the historians think it never existed at all, that it was a myth, a legend, a car too good to have been real. He put his glasses back on and looked at the wreck with wet eyes. And it's been sitting under a tarp behind a stack of paint cans in Edward Ashford's fourth garage the whole time. The shop was very quiet. "You're sure?" Isaiah said. "You're sure that's what this is?" "No," Brooks said. "Not sure. Not yet. That's what verification is for, and it will take days, and there are 3 specific things I need to find on this car to be sure, and if I find all 3, I will get down on this filthy floor and weep, and you will let me." He stood up. "But Isaiah, listen to me, man to man." He put a hand on Isaiah's shoulder, and his grip was surprisingly strong. "In my professional opinion, based on 40 years of doing this, and one glance at that frame, you have the Hale prototype in your shop. And if you do, it is not worth $400. What's it worth?" Brooks was quiet a moment. "The last car of comparable significance to come to market, and there is nothing truly comparable. That's the point. This is one of one. This is the only one sold for a number. I'm not going to say out loud in a garage before we've verified anything, because I don't want to be responsible for what it does to your blood pressure." He squeezed Isaiah's shoulder. "But you should sit down when you hear it. That much I'll tell you." Isaiah didn't sit down. He looked at the car, and then he looked at the keys still in his hand, and he thought about the woman in the red dress throwing them across the floor, and a slow, strange feeling moved through him that wasn't triumph and wasn't anger that he couldn't have named if you'd paid him. "9, Brooks said. "What? You've got that look like you won't rest until I give you a number, and if I don't, you'll needle me for a week." The old man sighed. "If it verifies, if all 3 things are on that car, then we are talking conservatively somewhere in the neighborhood of $9 million. The wrench Isaiah hadn't realized he was holding slipped out of his hand and hit the concrete floor with a clang that rang through the whole shop. They worked for 4 days. Brooks came every morning at 7 and stayed until his old body gave out around dark, and Isaiah worked the hours between in the dead of night after he'd put Micah to bed with the bay doors locked and the blinds down and one work light burning. They didn't restore the car. Brooks was adamant about that you do not touch a thing, you do not clean a thing. Its ruin is part of its history. Now they only uncovered it gently, an inch at a time. A little rust flaked away here to read a stamp. A panel eased off there to photograph what was underneath. On the first day, Brooks found the first of his 3 things, a casting mark on the engine block, a tiny stylized H that Augustus Hale had used as his signature, and when he found it, the old man had to go sit in his car for 20 minutes. On the second day, they found the second thing, and Brooks didn't weep, but his hands shook for an hour afterward. On the third day, Micah started asking questions. "Dad?" The boy was sitting on the workbench doing his homework where Isaiah could see him the way he did most evenings, 10 years old and small for it, and sharp as a tack. "Why's the old man crying about the car?" "He's not crying, buddy." "He was, yesterday. I saw him by his car in the parking lot." Isaiah wiped his hands and came over and leaned against the bench beside his son. "You want the truth." "Always." That was Dana's word. "Always." The boy said it just like her, and it got Isaiah every time right in the middle of the chest. "The truth is," Isaiah said, "I think this car might be something very special. Something a lot of people looked for a long time and never found. And I think we found it. And Dr. Brooks, the old man, he spent his whole life caring about cars like this one, and he thought this one was gone forever. And now it's not. And when you spend your whole life loving something and thinking it's lost, and then one day it isn't lost anymore, that'll bring a grown man to tears, Micah. That's not weakness. That's a life meaning something. Micah considered this with the total seriousness only a 10-year-old can bring to a thing. Is it worth a lot of money? Isaiah looked at his son for a long moment. Yeah, he said. It's worth a lot of money. Like new bike money. Isaiah laughed, and it cracked in the middle. A little more than that, buddy. Like a house. Micah. Isaiah crouched down so he was eye to eye with his boy. Listen to me. Money's not the thing about this car. You hear me? A lot of people are going to find out about this car soon, and they're going to talk about it like the money's the only thing that matters. And I need you to remember what your daddy told you before all that noise starts. The thing about this car isn't what it's worth. It's what it is. A man built it. A man nobody remembers. He built something beautiful and true, and it got taken from him and hidden away, and everybody forgot he ever lived. And now we get to say his name again. That's the thing about this car. You understand me? Micah nodded slowly. What was his name? Augustus Hale. Augustus Hale. Micah repeated, careful like Isaiah had taught him to repeat the important things. Okay, I'll remember. Good man. Isaiah stood, ruffled his son's hair, and went back to the car with something warm sitting in his chest against the cold weight of everything else. He should have known it couldn't stay secret. It broke on the 4th day, and it broke the way these things always break, not because anybody meant it to, but because Brooks had to make one phone call to one colleague to arrange one piece of authentication equipment. And that colleague told one person who posted 3 sentences on a collector's forum, and by that evening, Isaiah's phone would not stop ringing. Turn it off, Brooks said grimly, watching Isaiah decline the 11th call in 20 minutes. Turn it off, don't answer numbers you don't know, and lock those doors, because it is about to get very ugly around here, and I am sorry because it's my fault. It's not your fault. It is a little my fault. I got excited and I called Petrov about the spectrometer. The old man rubbed his face. In 40 years I never learned to keep my mouth shut about a beautiful thing. It's the one flaw in me. Well, he straightened up. It's out now. And here's what happens next, so you're ready for it. First come the collectors. Men with more money than sense who will offer you cash tonight right now for a car we haven't finished verifying because the rumor of it is already worth a gamble to them. Don't take it. Whatever they offer, don't take it. The number's a fraction of what it's worth, and they know it, and they're counting on you not knowing it. I won't take it. Then come the reporters because a story like this, a mechanic, a joke, a fortune, it writes itself. They'll be here by morning. Then, Brooks paused. Then, Isaiah, comes the part I'm sorry about in advance. Then come the people who'll say it isn't really yours. Isaiah looked up. It's mine. She gave it to me. In front of 200 people. I signed the transfer. Read every line. I believe you. But when there's $9 million sitting in a man's garage, people find lawyers, and lawyers find arguments. And the argument they'll find is that a gift made as a, what did they call it? A joke. A joke. That a gift made in jest of a thing whose value the giver didn't understand might be voidable, might be reversible. That's the argument. It won't hold you signed a legal transfer, and I'll testify to the whole ugly performance myself. I was told about it by Reggie in detail, but they'll make it. She'll make it. Because the woman who threw those keys across the floor is going to find out very soon what she threw away. And Isaiah? Brooks looked at him hard. A woman like that does not lose gracefully. You understand? She has never once in her life had to. As if the universe had been waiting for its cue, Isaiah's phone buzzed again. He almost declined it. Then he saw the name on the screen because this time it wasn't an unknown number. It was a text. From Reggie. Isaiah, turn on the local news. Right now. Isaiah walked to the little TV mounted in the corner of the office, the one he kept on low during slow afternoons, and turned it up. A reporter stood in front of the Ashford estate gates. and the words scrolling along the bottom of the screen made the coffee go cold in Isaiah's stomach. Lost Ashford prototype. $400 junk car, given away at charity gala, may be worth millions. Still developing, the reporter was saying, but sources close to the collector community suggest the vehicle reportedly given away as part of a charity event at the Ashford estate just last week may in fact be a lost experimental prototype of enormous historical value. We reached out to the Ashford Foundation for comment, and moments ago received this statement from Camille Ashford herself. The picture cut to Camille, not the woman in the red dress radiant and cruel under a spotlight. This Camille was in a cream blouse, in what looked like a study hair, pulled back face composed into something careful and warm, and utterly unlike the woman who'd thrown the keys. Naturally, we're thrilled if this turns out to be a genuine piece of my father's legacy, Camille was saying, and her voice was smooth as glass. There does seem to have been a great deal of confusion at the event. The vehicle was never formally intended to leave the family's stewardship, and we're currently in the process of clarifying the situation with all parties involved. My father's legacy means everything to me, and I know he would have wanted this treasure properly cared for. We're confident this will all be resolved. The picture cut back to the reporter. Isaiah turned the TV off. The shop was silent. Brooks was looking at him. Clarifying the situation, Isaiah said quietly. In the process of clarifying the situation with all parties involved. There it is, Brooks said, right on schedule. Isaiah stood there a moment. Then, to Brooks's surprise, he laughed one short, disbelieving breath. A week ago, Isaiah said, she couldn't get a museum to take that car. She quoted the scrapyard for the tow. She threw the keys across the floor and called it charity for the working man, and 200 people laughed at me. And now, he gestured at the dark TV. Now it's her father's legacy. Now it means everything to her. Now I'm one of the parties involved. Money changes what a thing means to people, Brooks said. It shouldn't, but it does, to most people. Isaiah's phone buzzed a third time. Another number he didn't know. He looked at it, then looked at Brooks. Answer it, Brooks said. Might as well hear what we're dealing with. Isaiah put it on speaker. Turner's Garage. Mr. Turner. A man's voice, smooth professional, the voice of somebody who bills by the quarter hour. My name is Gerald Fint. I'm an attorney representing the Ashford Foundation. I'm hoping we can have a brief friendly conversation about the vehicle currently in your possession. It's not in my possession, Isaiah said. It's mine. There's a difference. A small pause. Well, that's rather the point of what I'm hoping we can discuss. You see, Mr. Turner, the vehicle was transferred to you under circumstances that were, how shall I put this, not entirely well understood by either party at the time. My client is prepared to be very generous. She'd like to offer you a settlement to return the vehicle to the family along with a payment of, say, $50,000 for your trouble. That's a considerable sum for a working man, Mr. Turner. Cash, very clean. No lawyers, no headaches, no headlines. You could do a great deal with $50,000. Isaiah looked at Brooks. Brooks was shaking his head slowly, a grim little smile on his old face mouthing a word. 9. 50,000, Isaiah said. $50,000. Wired to you by end of business tomorrow. All you have to do is say yes and give us back the car. Isaiah was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm and even and unbothered, the exact same voice he'd used in the great terrible room with 200 people laughing. Mr. Fint, he said, can I ask you a question? Of course. When Miss Ashford threw those keys across the floor and called it charity, was that well understood by both parties? Or was that just me? The line was quiet. I read the transfer document before I signed it. Isaiah went on. Every line. Your firm drew it up. It says in the plainest English there is that the vehicle described is transferred to me, Isaiah Turner, free and clear as a gift. No conditions, no reservations. 200 witnesses. It's on video, I'd guess, because rich people film their own parties. So I'm going to say no to your $50,000. And I'll tell you why. Mr. Turner, I'd strongly advise. It's not about the money, Isaiah said. I know that's the last thing a man in your line of work expects to hear, but it isn't. That car belonged to a man named Augustus Hale. You ever heard that name, Mr. Fint? Silence. No, Isaiah said. Didn't think so. Nobody has. And that's the whole problem. Now, you have yourself a good night. And he hung up. He set the phone down on the bench very gently and stood there breathing. Brooks was staring at him with something like wonder. $50,000? The old man said. You just turned down $50,000 in cash on the phone in 10 seconds without blinking. Do you have any idea how many men in your position would have— I know exactly how many men in my position would have taken it, Isaiah said quietly. That's why she offered it. She looked at me at that party, and she saw a man who'd take $50,000 and be grateful. She still thinks that's who I am. He picked up a shop rag and wiped his hands slow, the old habit. She's about to find out different. The phone rang again, and again. Isaiah turned it face down on the bench and let it buzz. They're not gonna stop, Brooks said. You know that. It's going to get so much worse before it gets better. The lawyers, the press, the offers, the ownership fight. Are you ready for what you just started, son? Because there's still time to take the $50,000 and walk away clean. I wouldn't think less of you. Some men aren't built for a war. Isaiah folded the rag and set it down. He walked over to the car and stood in front of it, looking at the ruined hood at the frame Augustus Hale had built by hand at a bench 60 years ago, and then lost to a man who buried it behind paint cans and forgot his name. My daddy was a mechanic, Isaiah said. His daddy before him worked a foundry. Every man in my family, far back as we can trace it, made things or fixed things with his hands. And every single one of them got told at one time or another that they weren't as good as they were, that they didn't belong where they were standing. My grandfather could rebuild any engine ever made, and he had to come in the back door of the shop he worked at for 30 years. He put his hand on the hood. So no, Dr. Brooks. I'm not going to take her $50,000 and walk away clean. Not because I'm greedy, because I finally found something that's mine that they can't say I don't deserve, that I earned by knowing what I know and seeing what nobody else in that whole rich room could see. He turned around. She threw the keys, Isaiah said, in front of everybody, and now she wants them back. Well, she should have looked closer before she threw them. Brooks looked at him for a long moment. Then the old man reached down, picked up his satchel, and set it on the bench with the air of a man rolling up his sleeves. Then we'd better make sure it verifies, Brooks said. All three things. Because when this goes to a fight, and it will, the only thing that matters is whether we can prove what this is, beyond any doubt. Petrov's bringing the spectrometer at dawn. We find the third mark, we photograph everything, we document the chain of custody down to the minute, and we make it so airtight that no lawyer alive can crack it. He looked up. You in? I'm in. Then get some sleep because you won't get any tomorrow. Brooks headed for the door, then stopped, one hand on the frame, and looked back at the wreck sitting on the lift under the single work light. 60 years, he said softly. 60 years. I thought you were a story we told each other. And here you are, in a garage on Fenwick and 3rd, waiting for a man who could see you. He shook his head. There's a kind of justice in that, Isaiah. I don't know what kind yet, but there's a kind. He left. The door closed behind him. Isaiah stood alone in his shop with the car and the keys, and the letters scratched into the old leather fob, AH, and the phone buzzing face down on the bench like an angry insect, and the whole world starting to turn its eyes toward him. He didn't feel afraid. He kept waiting to feel afraid, and it didn't come. He walked over, picked up the phone, and finally shut it off. Then he pulled the work light closer, sat back down on the stool in front of the car that a billionaire had thrown at him as a joke, and went back to the slow, patient, careful work of uncovering the truth. 1 inch at a time, the only kind of work he'd ever known how to do, the only kind that had ever in the end been worth a damn. Petrov came at dawn with a spectrometer in a padded case, and 2 graduate students who weren't allowed to know where they were, and by 9 o'clock in the morning they had found the third thing. It was on the inside of the firewall, hidden behind a bracket that had to be unbolted to reach it, a small brass plate tarnished nearly black that Augustus Hale had riveted there 60 years ago, and that no one had laid eyes on since. Brooks cleaned it with a cotton swab, and a solution he mixed himself with hands that would not stop trembling, and letter by letter it came up out of the dark. Built by hand. A. Hail. For the ones who come after. 1963. Brooks read it 3 times. Then he sat down on the floor of Isaiah's garage. The 80-year-old man just lowered himself right down onto the concrete, and he put his face in his hands, and he wept. Isaiah crouched beside him and put a hand on his back and didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything to say. Micah, who'd been dropped at school an hour before, would have been proud of him for remembering the man's name. For the ones who come after. Isaiah read it again over Brooks's shoulder and felt something move in his chest that had nothing to do with money. He knew, Brooks said, muffled into his hands. He knew nobody would ever see it. He built the greatest car of his generation, and he knew Ashford was going to bury it, and he signed it anyway. For the ones who come after. 60 years, and here we are. We're the ones who came after Isaiah, you and me and that boy of yours. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, unashamed. Petrov, get up here. Confirm the alloy against the plate. I want it airtight. Petrov ran his spectrometer over the firewall and the frame rails and the engine block, and the numbers came up on his little screen, and he went pale and quiet. The alloy composition is consistent with the metallurgical records from Hale's patent filings, Petrov said in the flat, careful voice of a man who does not want to overstate a thing. The casting marks match. The construction methodology matches. Nathaniel. I've spent 30 years being skeptical about everything. It's my whole professional personality, and I'm telling you this is it. This is the Hale prototype. There is no reasonable doubt. Brooks got to his feet. He looked at Isaiah, and his old face was wet and shining and fierce. You have it in writing now, he said. 3 independent verification points, spectrographic analysis, a signed authentication from Petrov, and 1 from me, chain of custody documented to the minute since it left the estate. Isaiah, it's real. It's confirmed. You own the Hale prototype free and clear, and there is not a lawyer on this earth who can take it from you. Isaiah stood there and let it land. He'd known more or less since that first night under the car, but knowing a thing in your gut and hearing it said out loud by 2 men with degrees and instruments were different animals. He walked over to the workbench and picked up the phone he'd turned off the night before, and he turned it on, and it began to buzz almost immediately, the missed calls and messages pouring in like water through a broken dam. 41 missed calls. He scrolled through them. Numbers he didn't know. A few he did. Reggie 6 times. And 1 voicemail from a number with no name that he almost skipped past until he saw the transcript preview underneath it, and his thumb went still. Mr. Turner, this is Camille Ashford. I think you and I should talk privately before this gets out of hand. I'd like to come to you. She left a voicemail, Isaiah said. Brooks came over and looked at the screen. Camille herself, not the lawyer. Camille herself. Then something's changed. Brooks frowned. She sent the lawyer first, that's what they always do. They send the lawyer to feel you out and offer you a fraction. When the principal calls personally, it means the lawyer failed, and she's decided to handle you directly. She's coming to charm you, Isaiah, or to threaten you. Sometimes they're the same thing in a woman like that. He looked up. You going to call her back? Isaiah looked at the phone a long moment. No, he said. I'm not going to call her back. Good. I'm going to let her come. She came the next afternoon. Isaiah heard the car before he saw it. The low, expensive purr of something German and immaculate pulling up outside a garage that mostly saw 15-year-old sedans with check engine lights. He was under a customer's truck when it arrived, a real customer. A real job, because bills didn't stop, just because your garage had a $9 million car in the back bay under a tarp and a padlock. He slid out on the creeper, wiped his hands, and stood up as the bell over the door rang. Camille Ashford walked into his shop like she was walking into a place she'd already decided to buy. She wasn't in the red dress. She was in something soft and gray and expensive that was trying very hard to look casual, and her hair was down, and her face had been arranged into an expression of warm, rueful humility that Isaiah recognized instantly, because he'd watched her put on a dozen different faces in the space of one gala, and none of them had been real. "Mr. Turner." She smiled. She had a wonderful smile. It had probably gotten her a great many things in her life. "I hoped I'd catch you. I know I should have called ahead. I did leave a message. I got it. You didn't call back." "No." The smile held, but something flickered behind it. She wasn't used to that. She glanced around the shop, the cracked concrete, the pegboard of tools, the ancient coffee maker, the little TV, the photograph of Dana and Micah taped to the side of the toolbox, and Isaiah watched her take inventory of his whole life in about 4 seconds and decide what it was worth. "May I sit?" she asked. "There's a stool." She sat on the stool, crossing her legs, folding her hands, composing herself. Isaiah stayed standing, wiping the same clean spot on his hands with the rag waiting. "I owe you an apology," Camille said. "Okay." She blinked. She'd clearly rehearsed a speech, and okay wasn't the line she'd expected to come after her opening. She recovered. "What I did at the gala it was cruel. It was thoughtless and cruel, and I've thought about it a great deal since, and I'm ashamed of it. Truly. I get carried away performing for those people I always have. It's a flaw, and I turned you into a prop, and that was wrong. I'm sorry, Mr. Turner. I am genuinely sorry." And the strange thing Isaiah thought was that some small part of it might even be true. Not enough, but some. "I appreciate that," he said. "So." She smiled again, warmer now, leaning into what she thought was a thaw. "Here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping we can find a way through this that's good for both of us. That car, it's my father's. His life's work in a way. I didn't understand that when I—" She gestured vaguely. "When I did what I did. I thought it was junk. He never told me what it was. He never told me anything." Something crossed her face quick that Isaiah couldn't read. "But it's a piece of him, and I'd like it back. And I understand that legally it's yours now, and I'm not here to fight you on that. I'm here to make it right. So I'm prepared to offer you—" "Miss Ashford." She stopped. "Before you say a number," Isaiah said, "I want to tell you something, and I want you to actually hear it because I don't think anybody's said it to you in a long time." He set the rag down. "That car was never your father's life's work." Her composure cracked just slightly. "Excuse me, it wasn't his. He didn't build it. He didn't design it. He couldn't have. He wasn't an engineer. He was a businessman, a good one, but he never held a torch in his life." Isaiah walked over to the back bay, unlocked the padlock, and pulled the tarp off the wreck. "This was built by a man named Augustus Hale. Have you ever heard that name?" Camille stared at the car. "No. He worked for a company your father bought. He was maybe the most gifted engineer of his whole generation, and he built exactly one car, this one 60 years ago, and it was decades ahead of anything anybody else was making. And then he had some kind of falling out with your father, and he walked away with nothing, and he died poor and forgotten. And this car. The only proof he ever existed, the only proof he was ever a genius, got hidden in the back of your father's 4th garage under a tarp behind a stack of paint cans, where it sat for 20 years until you threw the keys to it across a marble floor and called it charity for the working man." The shop was very quiet. Camille was not smiling anymore. "So no, Miss Ashford," Isaiah said. "It's not your father's legacy. Your father was the man who buried it. Augustus Hale is the legacy. And I know his name, and now you know it too. And there's a brass plate on the inside of that firewall that says for the ones who come after, and I intend to be one of the ones who comes after. So." He picked the rag back up. "Now you can say your number if you still want to. But I want you to say it knowing all that." Camille sat very still on the stool. For a long moment, she didn't say anything at all, and something was happening behind her eyes, some struggle Isaiah couldn't see the shape of. $10 million, she said finally quietly. "That's my number. $10 million, Mr. Turner, for the car. I had it valued discreetly. 9 is the estimate. I'm offering you 10. $1 million over the appraisal in cash this week to walk away and let me have the car." It was a staggering number. Isaiah felt the size of it move through the room. $10 million. He thought about the electric bill and the parts invoice, and the $15 to Mrs. Alvarez and the loan officer who'd found a reason to say no. He thought about Micah and college, and never worrying about money again, and a garage with the newest lifts and every tool made, and a future so soft and safe he could hardly picture it. $10 million. No, Isaiah said. Camille's head came up. I'm sorry. I said no. Mr. Turner, she laughed a little disbelieving. It's $10 million. Do you understand it's more than the car is worth. It's more than you could get at any auction. It's more than anyone will ever offer you. Forgive me, but you're a working man. You have a son. I saw the photograph. You have a business that is... She glanced around. That is clearly struggling. $10 million solves every problem you will ever have. Why in God's name would you say no? And here it was, Isaiah thought. The question everybody was going to ask him, the question the lawyers couldn't understand, and the collectors couldn't understand, and now the heiress couldn't understand the question that had a simple answer that none of them would believe. Because you don't want the car, he said. I just offered you $10 million. You don't want the car, Miss Ashford. You want it to go away. Isaiah pulled the stool from the workbench over and for the first time sat down so they were level, so he was talking to her and not standing over her. You didn't come here because you love that car. You came here because a week ago you humiliated a black mechanic in front of 200 of your friends over what you thought was a piece of junk, and now the whole world's about to find out it was worth $9 million and you can't stand it. That's what the $10 million is. It's not for the car. It's to erase the story. It's so that instead of billionaire heiress mocks working man throws away fortune, the headline gets to be Ashford family recovers father's lost treasure. You're not buying a car. You're buying back your dignity. And I'm sorry, but that's not for sale in this shop. Camille Ashford's face went through several things very fast. Shock, anger. A flash of something that might have been shame before it settled hard into the face he suspected was closest to the real one, the one under all the arranged expressions. You think you understand me? She said cold now. You've known me for one party and one afternoon, and you think you understand me. No, ma'am, I don't understand you at all. I'm just telling you what I see. It's the only thing I'm good at, seeing what a thing really is under how it's dressed up. He nodded at the car. Same as I did with her. Camille stood up. The soft, rueful humility was entirely gone now. You're making a mistake, she said. A big one. That car is going to bring lawyers, Mr. Turner. Real ones. It's going to bring questions about how the transfer was made, whether it was made in error, whether a gift of a thing whose value was unknown can be voided, Isaiah said. Yeah. Your lawyer, Mr. Finty, mentioned that on the phone right before he offered me $50,000. Funny thing, though. Now you're offering $10 million. So which is it? Is the car worth $50,000 because it was junk, or is it worth $10 million because it's your father's legacy? Because you can't argue both, Miss Ashford, not to a judge. Your lawyer already picked a lane when he called it junk, and it's on a recording because I record my business calls. It's posted right there on the wall by the phone. He pointed. A small printed sign, calls may be recorded for quality and accountability. So when your real lawyers come, and I know they will, you tell them Isaiah Turner read every line of the transfer before he signed it, and Isaiah Turner has it on tape that your firm called this car worthless the day before your family decided it was priceless. And then you let them tell you how that's going to go in front of a judge. Camille stared at him. And slowly, for the first time since she'd walked in, the performance dropped away entirely. And what was left was not the cruel woman from the gala, and not the humble woman who'd apologized on the stool, but something rawer, and more surprised, the look of a person who has walked into a room expecting to win, and realized halfway through that they are losing to someone they'd written off entirely. Who are you? She said. It came out almost helpless. I'm the mechanic you gave a junk car to as a joke, Isaiah said. You had my name at the party. Isaiah Turner. You said it out loud to 200 people so they could laugh at it. You remember?" She flinched. "I remember," she said quietly. They looked at each other across the shop, and for a strange suspended moment, neither of them said anything, and Isaiah thought not with satisfaction exactly, but with something clearer than that. She's finally looking at me. First time. Took $9 million, but she's finally actually looking at me. Then the moment broke. Camille gathered herself, smoothed the front of her gray dress, and walked to the door with her chin up. "This isn't over," she said, hand on the door. "No," Isaiah agreed. "I don't imagine it is." She left. The German car purred to life and pulled away, and Isaiah sat on the stool a long moment, looking at the space where she'd been. Brooks came out of the back office where he'd been listening to every word. $10 million, the old man said. "Isaiah, you turned down $10 million just now. I heard it. I was standing right there and I heard it, and I still don't believe it." "I heard it too. Do you, son? Are you sure? Because that's a man could—" Brooks was actually flustered. "I've spent my whole life around wealthy people, and I have never once seen anybody turn down $10 million for anything, let alone a man who— "A man who what?" Isaiah looked at him steadily. "A man who needs it." Brooks stopped. "I'm sorry, that was— It's all right. You're right. I need it. God knows I need it." Isaiah stood up, walked over to the car, and put his hand on the ruined hood, the way he did now, the way it had become a habit, like laying a hand on the shoulder of an old friend. "But listen to me, Dr. Brooks, because I've been trying to figure out how to say this since that first night, and I think I finally got it." He was quiet a second. "If I sell her that car for $10 million, you know what happens. She hides it again. Maybe not under a tarp, maybe in a climate-controlled private collection with her father's name on a little plaque. But it goes away. The public never sees it. Nobody ever learns Hale's name. The story becomes Ashford recovers Ashford treasure, and 60 years from now, Augustus Hale is still a ghost story nobody believes. $10 million to bury a man twice." He shook his head. "I can't do it. I keep trying to talk myself into it for Micah, for the shop, and I can't. Because I know what it feels like to be the man nobody believes is as good as he is. My grandfather came in the back door for 30 years, and Augustus Hale signed his life's work for the ones who come after, and then he laid down and died, and I am not going to be the man who takes $10 million to make sure nobody ever hears him." Brooks was quiet for a long time. "You know," he said finally, "when I was young, I believed men like you existed. I read about them. Then I got old and rich, and I decided I'd been naive, that everybody had a number, that it was just a matter of finding it." He shook his head slowly. "And here you are, in a garage on Fenwick and 3rd, making me feel like a fool for ever stopping believing it." He put his hand on Isaiah's shoulder. "All right, so we don't sell it to her. What do we do with it?" "I don't know yet," Isaiah admitted. "I know what I don't want. I don't want it hidden. I don't want Hale's name buried. I don't want it to be about the money. Past that—" He shrugged. "I'm a mechanic, not a whatever you'd need to be to figure the rest out. I'll get there. First we make sure they can't take it. Everything else comes after." That night, after he'd picked up Micah and fed him and helped him with fractions and put him to bed, Isaiah came back down to the shop alone the way he did now, and he pulled the tarp off the car, and he sat with it. He hadn't gone through the inside of it yet, not really. Brooks had been so adamant about not disturbing anything, and the verification had focused on the frame, the engine, the marks, the things that proved what it was. But the who of it, the human part, Isaiah hadn't touched. The interior was ruined. Like the rest, the seats cracked and molded, the dash faded. But tonight, sitting with it in the quiet, something pulled at him. He opened the driver's door. It shrieked on its hinges and eased himself down into the seat, careful the old springs groaning under him. He put his hands on the wheel. Augustus Hale had sat here. 60 years ago, this man, this ghost, had sat right here with his hands on this wheel and known he'd built something impossible. Isaiah sat there a while, Then, because he was a mechanic, and mechanics can't leave a thing unexamined, he reached down under the seat, feeling for the tracks, checking the mounts out of pure habit, and his fingers found something that wasn't part of the car, something wedged up under the seat far back against the firewall. Flat, rectangular, wrapped in oilcloth gone stiff and brittle with age. Isaiah went very still. He worked it loose gently the way Brooks had taught him to touch everything on this car, and drew it out into the light. It was a package about the size of a large book bound in oilcloth and tied with twine that crumbled when he touched it. Heavy. Something solid inside. Something that had been hidden deliberately by someone who did not want it found by anyone who wasn't looking as carefully as a man had to look to find it. His heart was pounding. He carried it to the workbench under the good light and set it down and just looked at it a moment, this thing that had ridden hidden inside a hidden car for 60 years. Then carefully, he untied what was left of the twine and folded back the stiff oilcloth. Inside were journals. 3 of them leather-bound, their pages swollen and warped but intact. A bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. And photographs. A stack of old black and white photographs. The top one showing a young man standing proudly beside a gleaming car. This car whole and new and beautiful. And beside him, one hand on the man's shoulder, another man in an expensive suit smiling for the camera. Isaiah picked up the top photograph and turned it over. On the back, in faded pencil, in a careful hand, Augustus and Edward. The day she first ran. We were friends once, before. Isaiah set it down slowly, and then he opened the first journal to the first page and began in the quiet of his shop at midnight to read the private words of a dead man that Edward Ashford had buried along with the car words that had been waiting 60 years for someone to look closely enough to find them. He read the first line, then the second. Then he stopped and read them again, and felt the whole shape of the thing he thought he understood begin quietly to turn into something else entirely. The first line said, "Edward came to see me today. He didn't apologize. He never will. But he sat in the chair a long time, and I think that was as close as a man like him can get." Isaiah read it 3 times, and then he read the second line and the third, and by the fourth he had forgotten it was midnight, and forgotten his back ached from the stool, and forgotten everything except the voice rising up off the swollen pages of a dead man's journal. Augustus Hale had not hated Edward Ashford. That was the first thing that broke Isaiah's understanding open. He'd expected from the way Brooks told the story, from the shape of these things, that the journals would be full of bitterness. A wronged genius cataloging his betrayal. And there was some of that early on. But it wasn't the heart of it. The heart of it was grief. They were friends, Isaiah said out loud to the empty shop, the way you say a thing to make sure it's real. He turned back to the photograph. Augustus and Edward. We were friends once, before. He read for 3 hours. He couldn't stop. The story came up out of the pages in pieces, out of order, the way a man writes his own life when he's writing it only for himself. 2 young men back before either of them was anything. Edward Ashford, with the money sense and the ambition and the gift for making people believe in him. Augustus Hale, with the hands and the mind and the impossible ideas. They'd started something together, not a company yet. Just a dream in a rented garage, not so different from the one Isaiah was sitting in. And they'd built things, and they'd argued about everything, and they'd been for a while closer than brothers. And then Edward's father had died, and left him a little money and a lot of ambition, and Edward had started buying things, building the empire, and somewhere in all that buying, the friendship had curdled into something else. Edward wanted to own the ideas. Augustus wanted to build them. And the car, this car, the one Isaiah was sitting beside, had been the thing that broke them for good. He wanted to put his name on her. Hale had written in an entry dated the year the car was finished. Not both our names. His. He said the company built her, and he is the company, so the company's name goes on her, and my name goes nowhere. I told him a man doesn't put his name on another man's child. He said in business, there are no children, only assets. I think that was the truest and saddest thing Edward ever said to me. And I think he believed it, and I think it has cost him everything. He doesn't yet know he's lost. Isaiah set the journal down and rubbed his eyes and sat there in the dark a while. He'd built a whole picture of Edward Ashford in his head over the past week, The man who buried a genius, the villain who hid the car and stole the name. And the picture wasn't wrong exactly. But it wasn't the whole man, and the journals were showing him the rest, and the rest was harder to hold because the rest was human. There was a second bundle he hadn't opened yet. He untied it. These weren't journals. These were letters, and they were not from Augustus Hale. They were from Edward Ashford, and they had never been sent. Isaiah read the first one, and his throat went tight. It was dated 11 years ago, decades after the falling out, decades after Hale had died poor and forgotten. Edward Ashford, old by then, near the end, writing to a dead man. Augustus, it began. I have no one to say this to. My daughter won't speak to me, and I don't blame her. I built her the same way. I built everything like an asset, and now she's grown into exactly the cold thing I made her, and I hate it, and I did it, and I can't undo it. You would have known how to talk to her. You were always better with the human things. I was better with the machines, and I told myself that made me the serious one. And now I'm an old man alone in a house full of things I own and can't feel, and I would trade all of it, Augustus, all of it, to have one more argument with you in that garage. I'm sorry. I never said it. I'm saying it to a dead man because I was too proud to say it to a living one. I kept your car. I could never sell her. I could never show her either, because to show her would be to answer questions about who she really was, and I couldn't bear it. So she sits under a tarp, and I go and look at her sometimes, and I remember when we were young, and everything was still possible, and I hadn't yet learned to turn everyone I loved into a thing I owned. Isaiah put the letter down with a hand that wasn't quite steady. There were more. A dozen of them, maybe. Edward Ashford, over the last years of his life, writing letters to his dead friend that he never sent, hiding them inside the car along with the man's journals, so that the whole broken story of the two of them, the friendship and the betrayal and the grief and the apology that came 60 years too late, sat wrapped in oilcloth under the driver's seat, waiting. And in almost every letter threaded all through them was Camille. My daughter turned 30 today. I sent a car and a note. She sent the car back. I don't know how to reach her. I never learned. I was building the company, always the company, and Margaret raised her mostly alone until Margaret was gone, and then nobody raised her at all. She just grew like a plant. Nobody watered, and somehow she's brilliant, and somehow she's cruel. And both of those are mine, Augustus. Both of those I gave her, and I don't know how to give her the other things now. The soft things. I don't have them myself. You can't hand a child what you never had. And later, near the very end, if she ever finds these, I hope she does, and I hope she doesn't. Both at once, the way a coward hopes I want her to know it wasn't that I didn't love her. I loved her the way I loved you, Augustus, which is to say completely and silently and uselessly from behind a wall. I built myself and forgot how to climb. Tell her if the dead can tell. Tell her I saw her. I always saw her. I just never learned to say so. Isaiah read that last line and had to get up and walk to the bay door and stand there in the cold night air a while because his own eyes had gone hot. And he was thinking about Dana and about Micah asleep upstairs and about all the ways a man can love his child and all the ways he can fail to say it and how thin the line was between the two and how much it cost when you landed on the wrong side of it and ran out of time. He thought about Camille Ashford sitting on his stool that afternoon. He never told me anything. The flicker across her face he couldn't read. It's a piece of him. She didn't know. She had no idea any of this existed. She thought her father was exactly the cold man he'd made himself into, and she'd grown up into the mirror of him, and she'd spent her whole life believing that was all there ever was between them. A cold man and the cold daughter he'd forged. And the truth, the softer and more terrible truth, was sitting wrapped in oilcloth in a garage on Fenwick and 3rd, in the hands of a mechanic she'd humiliated for sport. Isaiah came back inside and sat down and looked at the journals and the letters and the photographs for a long, long time. He understood now what he had. And it was worth more than $9 million, and it was worth more than 10, because it couldn't be priced at all. He had a man's whole hidden heart. 2 men's really, and it belonged to a woman who didn't know she was starving for it. He didn't call her that night. He needed to think, and he needed to be sure, and he needed to talk to the one person whose judgment he trusted more than his own. "Micah," he said the next morning at the little kitchen table over cereal, "let me ask you something. Okay, if somebody was mean to you, real mean, in front of a lot of people, and then later you found out you had something that belonged to them, something they didn't even know they'd lost, something that would maybe, I don't know, help them, fix something broke in them, would you give it to them? After they were mean." Micah chewed and thought about it with his whole face the way he did. "Is it something they need?" Micah asked. "Or something they want?" Isaiah stared at his son. "Say that again." "You always say there's a difference between what people want and what they need. You said it about the car lady. You said she wanted the car to go away, but you didn't know what she needed." Micah shrugged and ate more cereal. "So is the thing something she needs, or just something she wants?" Isaiah reached across the table and put his hand on the back of his son's head and held it there a second, and Micah squirmed and said, "Dad, gross." And Isaiah laughed, and his eyes were wet. "It's something she needs," Isaiah said. "It's something she needs real bad, and she doesn't even know it exists. Then you gotta give it to her." Micah said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, because to a 10-year-old it was. "It doesn't matter that she was mean. If somebody needs a thing and you have it, you give it to them. That's just the rule." He looked up. "Isn't that the rule?" "Yeah, buddy," Isaiah said, his voice thick. "That's the rule. Your mama's rule. I just needed to hear you say it." He called Camille that afternoon. She answered on the first ring, and her voice was cold and braced, ready for a fight. "Mr. Turner, have you reconsidered my—" "I need you to come to the shop," Isaiah said. "Tonight. After you close up whatever billionaires close up. Come alone. No lawyer. This isn't about the car." A pause. "Everything with you is about the car." "No," Isaiah said. "This one isn't. I promise you that. Come at 8. And Miss Ashford come ready to hear something hard." He hung up before she could argue. Brooks thought he'd lost his mind. Isaiah had called him too and told him not everything but enough. And the old man had come to the shop at 7 and paced the floor. "You cannot give those to her," Brooks said. "Isaiah, think. Those documents, the journals, the letters, the photograph proving the car's true provenance, proving Hale built it and Ashford buried it. Those are the heart of your legal position. That photograph alone is worth it, corroborates everything. If you hand them to Camille Ashford, and she's the woman we both think she is, she destroys them. She burns them in a fireplace that night. And there's no proof of anything, and it's her word against yours. And suddenly, your airtight case has a hole in it the size of—" "I know. You know, and you're doing it anyway." "I made copies," Isaiah said. "Photographed every page, scanned everything, sent it to your email and Petrov's and a lawyer Reggie put me onto, and a safe deposit box. The originals I'm giving her, but the record's safe. I'm not a fool, Dr. Brooks. I'm just—" He searched for the word. "I'm just not gonna let being smart make me into somebody I don't want to be." Brooks stopped pacing. He looked at Isaiah a long moment. "You copied everything first," he said slowly. "So you protected the case. And then you're giving her the originals anyway. Because the originals, the actual paper her father actually held, the actual ink, that's the part that matters to her. Not the information, the objects, the things his hands touched." "Yeah." Brooks sat down heavily on the stool. "I have been doing this for 40 years, he said. "And I have never once met anyone who thinks the way you think." He shook his head. All right. I'll be in the back. I want to hear this." "No," Isaiah said gently. "You won't. This part's private. It's hers. She's about to find out who her father really was in front of a stranger she can't stand, and that's already going to be the hardest thing that ever happened to her. She doesn't need an audience. You can wait outside if you want, but you're not listening at the door. Not to this." Brooks looked at him, and something in the old man's face softened into something like reverence. "No," he agreed quietly. "No, you're right. Of course you're right." He gathered his satchel. I'll be in my car. Come get me when it's done." He stopped at the door. "Isaiah, whatever it is, the world could use about 10 million more of it, and I mean that as the highest thing I know how to say." He left. And at 8 o'clock, the German car pulled up outside, and Camille Ashford walked into the shop for the second time, braced and cold, and ready for war. "All right," she said before the door had even closed. "I'm here, alone. No lawyer as requested against my counsel's very strong advice. You said it wasn't about the car. So, what is it about?" Isaiah didn't answer right away. He'd set 2 stools out facing each other near the workbench, and on the bench sat the bundle rewrapped in the oilcloth, the twine replaced with a clean length he'd tied himself. "Sit down," he said. "Please." Something in his voice, not the calm she'd braced for something quieter and more serious, made her sit. "2 nights ago," Isaiah said, sitting across from her, "I was going through the car, really going through it, and I found something wedged up under the driver's seat. It had been there a long time, since before you were born, I'd guess." He put his hand on the bundle. "It's your father's, and it's Augustus Hale's. And I've spent 2 nights reading it and deciding what to do with it, and I've decided the only right thing is to give it to you. Because it's not mine. It was never mine. The car's mine. This isn't." Camille looked at this bundle. "What is it?" "It's the truth about your father," Isaiah said. "The real one. Not the one you grew up with." Her face closed like a door. "I know exactly who my father was, Mr. Turner. I don't need a mechanic to—" "He wrote you letters," Isaiah said quietly. "Near the end. A whole stack of them. He never sent them. He hid them in the car along with his best friend's journals, because he couldn't bear to send them, and couldn't bear to burn them either. And I read them. Miss Ashford, and I shouldn't have. They weren't for me. But I didn't know what they were until I'd already read them. And now I can't unread them, and I can't in good conscience keep them from you." He slid the bundle across the bench toward her. "Your father loved you. It's in every one of these. He loved you so much he couldn't say it, and it broke his heart, and he wrote it all down for a dead man, and hid it in a car because he was too proud and too broken to say it to your face while he was alive." Camille didn't touch the bundle. She was staring at it like it might be a trick. "That's not—" Her voice caught. "My father he wasn't a man who wasn't a—" "I know what you think he was. I thought the same thing from the outside. Cold, hard. A man who turned everything he touched into an asset." Isaiah leaned forward. "He said that. Those words. He wrote that he did that to you, and that he hated it, and that he didn't know how to undo it, because nobody ever taught him the soft things, so he couldn't hand them to you. He said—" Isaiah stopped because his own throat had closed. He made himself go on. "He said he loved you the way he loved Augustus. Completely and silently and uselessly, from behind a wall he built himself and forgot how to climb. He said he always saw you. He just never learned to say so. And he wrote it down and hid it because he hoped you'd find it someday, and he was afraid you would both at once, the way a coward hopes. Those are his words, not mine. His, not." Camille Ashford's hand had gone up to her mouth. "He was a stranger to me," she said, and her voice had gone very small, nothing like the woman on the staircase in the red dress. "My whole life. He was a stranger who paid for things. I used to think there was something wrong with me, that I was unlovable. That's why he couldn't—" She stopped. Her eyes were shining. "I built my whole self around being fine with it, around not needing it. I became him, Mr. Turner. Cold, cruel sometimes. At that party, the way I treated you, that was him. That was me being him. And I told myself it didn't matter because there'd never been anything else to be." "There was something else," Isaiah said gently. "It was just locked in a car." And Camille Ashford reached out finally with a trembling hand and touched the oilcloth bundle that held her father's hidden heart. And then she pulled it into her lap and bent over it, and the woman who had thrown keys across a marble floor and made 200 people laugh, the billionaire heiress, who had never once in her life had to lose, gracefully broke apart completely. Not as an heiress, not as an Ashford, not as anything but a daughter who had spent 40 years believing she was unloved and had just been handed proof, 60 years buried, that she had been wrong. Isaiah didn't say anything. He didn't reach for her. He just sat with her the way he'd sat with Brooks on the floor, the way you sit with a person when the only decent thing you can do is not leave them alone in it. She cried for a long time. When she finally lifted her head, her careful face was gone entirely. Mascara ruined, and she looked younger and lost, and for the first time since Isaiah had laid eyes on her real. "Why?" she said. "Why would you give me this? After what I did to you? You had every reason to. You could have used this. Against me. Against the family. Your lawyer would have told you to. Why would you just give it to me?" Isaiah thought about Micah at the breakfast table. If somebody needs a thing and you have it, you give it to them. That's just the rule. "Because you needed it," he said simply. "And I had it. That's the whole reason. My son told me that's the rule, and he got it from his mother, and she was the best person I ever knew, so I trust the rule." He shrugged. "And because I know what it is to lose the chance to hear something you needed to hear. My wife died 3 years ago. There were things I never said. Things she never said. And I would give more than $9 million, Miss Ashford, to have what you're holding in your lap right now. To have her hidden words in a box under a seat. You've got something almost nobody gets. A second chance to know somebody's already gone. I wasn't going to be the man who kept that from you. Not for money. Not for a legal case. Not for anything." Camille Ashford looked at him, holding her father's letters against her chest. And something passed over her face that Isaiah had not seen on it before. Not at the gala, not either time in his shop. Something that looked like the beginning of shame, turning into the beginning of grace. "I called you charity for the working man," she whispered. "In front of everyone. I threw the keys on the floor. And you—" She shook her head, tears starting again. "You're the first person in my entire life who ever gave me something without wanting anything back. And I mocked you for being poor." "You didn't know me," Isaiah said. "You know me a little now." "I do." She wiped her face uselessly with the back of her hand and let out a broken little laugh. "God, I do." She looked down at the bundle, then up at him, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed, still raw, still cracked open, but with something new underneath it. Something Isaiah recognized because he'd built his whole life on it. Resolve. "Mr. Turner, Isaiah, I came here tonight to fight you for that car. I had a whole strategy. My lawyer wrote me talking points." She laughed again wetly. "I don't want the car anymore. I don't. It's yours. It should be yours. God knows you're the only person in this whole story who ever deserved it. But I want—" She stopped and gathered herself and looked at him with her father's directness finally turned toward something warm. "I want to do something. With you. Not to you, not against you. With you. Something that would have—" Her voice caught. "Something that would have made him proud. Something real. Will you let me? Will you at least let me try?" And Isaiah Turner, sitting on a stool in his garage on Fenwick and 3rd across from a weeping billionaire holding her dead father's letters, looked at her for a long moment and felt the whole story. He thought he was in, quietly become a different story. A better one, the kind Dana would have believed in. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said, "and we'll see." What she was thinking, it turned out, was bigger than anything Isaiah had let himself imagine. "A school," Camille said. She was still holding the bundle against her chest, but her voice had steadied, and there was something lit up behind her ruined eyes. Now something that had been dead a long time, and had just been shocked back to life. "Not a school exactly. A place. Where kids who never get a chance to work with their hands get a chance. Kids from neighborhoods like the one this shop is in. Kids everybody's already decided aren't going to amount to anything the way everybody at that party had already decided about you before you opened your mouth." She wiped her face. "My father had more money than any human being needs, and he made it building machines, and he spent the last years of his life alone in a house writing letters to a dead man because he never learned how to give anybody anything but money. I don't want to be that. I've been that my whole life, And I found out tonight it's not even who I really am, it's just who I was scared into being. I want to give people something real. And you? She looked at him. You're the only person I've ever met who actually knows how to do that, so I'm asking you, build it with me. Isaiah was quiet a long moment. It was a beautiful idea. It was, in fact, almost exactly the idea that had been forming in the back of his own mind for days. The answer to the question of what to do with a car that couldn't be sold and couldn't be hidden and had to mean something. But he'd learned over a hard life to be careful with beautiful ideas, offered by people who'd been cruel to him, because sometimes the beauty was just a better-dressed version of the cruelty. Why? He said. And I want the real answer, Miss Ashford, not the one that sounds good. An hour ago you were going to fight me for that car. What changed? Because if what changed is that you feel guilty and you want to spend some money to stop feeling guilty, then I don't want your school. Guilt runs out. And when yours runs out, you'll leave. And there'll be 100 kids standing in a half-built building with your name coming off the wall. I've seen rich people get excited about the poor before. It never lasts past the ribbon cutting. The words were hard, and he meant them to be, and he watched to see what she'd do with them. Camille didn't flinch. She sat with it. And when she answered slow, like she was figuring it out as she said it, which was how Isaiah knew it was true. You're right that it started as guilt, she said. An hour ago, it was guilt. But that's not what it is now. She looked down at the bundle in her lap. My father wrote that he loved me the way he loved his friend, completely, and silently, and uselessly. And I've been sitting here holding it thinking, I don't want to love anything uselessly. He had this whole heart and he wasted it. He sat on it. He let it rot behind a wall until he died, and it was too late for both of us. And I've been doing the exact same thing. I have all this money, power, whatever, and I've done nothing with it but throw parties and mock mechanics. I've been useless. Silently, comfortably useless. She looked up. I don't want to find out at the end of my life that I had a heart the whole time and never spent it. That's not guilt, Isaiah. I think that might be the first real thing I've ever wanted. And I'm terrified of it. Which is how I know it's real. Isaiah studied her a long moment. Okay, he said finally. Then here's how it's going to work. And these aren't negotiations. These are the conditions. And if you don't want them, we shake hands and you go home with your father's letters, which are yours, regardless, no strings. But if you want me, this is how it is. Tell me. First, it doesn't have your name on it. It doesn't have your father's name on it. It doesn't say Ashford anywhere. Not on the building, not on the door, not on a plaque in the lobby. He held her eyes. It carries the name of the man who built that car. It's the Augustus Hale Institute or something like it. Because the whole entire point, is that a genius got erased, and we're unerasing him, and if we slap your family's name on it, we've just done the exact thing your father did all over again. We've buried Hale under Ashford one more time. I won't be part of that. Camille was quiet. He watched her fight some old reflex, some lifetime of assuming her name went on things, and then he watched her let it go. The Augustus Hale Institute, she said. Yes, God, yes. That's exactly right. He'd have... Her voice broke a little. My father would have wanted that. It's the apology he never got to make. Yes. Second, I run the shop floor. You can run the money, the fundraising, the business side, all the parts I don't know and don't want to know. But when it comes to who we take and how we teach them and what we build in there, that's mine. I've been the kid nobody believed in. I know what he needs to hear, and it's not something you learn at your kind of school. That part's mine. Done. Third. Isaiah leaned forward. The car. Camille went still. That car doesn't get sold, he said. Not to a collector, not to a museum that'll put it behind glass in another city, not to anybody. It stays. Right in the middle of that institute, where every kid who walks in the door sees it the first thing. Not restored, not shined up. Rusted exactly like it is, exactly like it was when a billionaire threw the keys to it across a floor and called it junk. He tapped the bench. Because that's the lesson. That's the whole lesson right there in one object. Everybody in that room looked at that car and saw $400 of scrap. I looked at it and saw a genius's whole life. And I want every kid who comes through those doors to stand in front of that rusted car and understand in their bones that the world is going to look at them the same way. Like they're junk. Like they're nothing. Like they're charity for the working man. And the world is going to be dead wrong. The same way it was wrong about that car, and wrong about Augustus Hale, and wrong about me. That car is the whole curriculum. It doesn't get sold, it gets seen. Camille Ashford looked at the man across from her, and her eyes filled again, and this time she didn't fight it. "You know," she said thickly, "at the party, I looked at you, and I thought I knew everything about you in one glance. A poor mechanic. Charity for the working man. I've never been more wrong about anything in my life. You see more than anyone I have ever met. You saw the car. You saw my father. You saw me, the real thing under all of it, faster than anybody who's known me 30 years. She wiped her eyes and let out a shaky breath. The car stays. It stays rusted. It stays in the middle of everything. Yes, to all of it, Isaiah. Yes. And she put out her hand across the workbench over the space where the oilcloth bundle had sat, and Isaiah Turner looked at it a moment, the manicured hand of the woman who'd humiliated him, offered now not as charity, but as partnership. And then he took it, and they shook in a garage on Fenwick and 3rd at nearly midnight, on the beginning of something neither of them could yet see the size of. Brooks wept when they told him, of course. He was going to be the Institute's historian, its first curator, the keeper of the Hale story, and he took to it like a man given back 30 years of his life. He spent his days now cataloging the journals, tracking down what happened to the people in the old photographs, reconstructing a life that had been almost completely erased. "I spent 40 years, he told Isaiah once, certain that everything worth finding had already been found. And then a man called me at 1 a.m. You didn't just find a car, son. You found me a reason to still be here." The lawyers in the end came to nothing. Once Camille withdrew every claim publicly, in a statement she wrote herself, and refused to let the Foundation's PR people soften, there was nothing left to fight over. The story that ran wasn't the one anybody had braced for. It wasn't Billionaire mocks working man. It wasn't Ashford recovers treasure. It was stranger and better than either an heiress and a mechanic, a lost genius, a rusted car, and a school being built where a genius's name would finally, 60 years late, go up on a wall. It took 19 months. They found a building 3 blocks from Isaiah's garage, an old shuttered brake factory brick, and high windows, the kind of place that had employed the neighborhood's grandfathers before it closed and took the neighborhood's future with it. Camille bought it outright. Isaiah gutted it and rebuilt the inside with his own hands alongside the crew because he wasn't going to run a place he hadn't built. They put in lifts and benches and tool walls, welding bays and an engine lab and a classroom that didn't look like a classroom because Isaiah refused to let it. And in the center, in a wide open space where all the sightlines met on a low platform under a single skylight, they set the rusted 1963 Hale prototype, untouched, exactly as it was. There was a small brass plate mounted in front of it. Camille had wanted a whole display placards, the provenance, the $9 million valuation, the story. Isaiah said no, just the plate, and on it, the only words that mattered copied exactly from the firewall of the car itself in Augustus Hale's own hand, built by hand, for the ones who come after. They opened on a Saturday in the fall. Isaiah had not wanted a gala. He'd been very clear about that. No tuxedos, no champagne, no string quartet. Nobody who'd been at the Ashford estate that night unless they came to actually help. So, it wasn't a gala. It was a neighborhood packed into a rebuilt brake factory. Kids and their parents and grandparents folding tables of real food that tasted like food, and in the middle of all of it, the car. The first class was 22 kids. Isaiah had chosen every one of them personally. Kids the schools had given up on, kids with records. Kids nobody had ever once told you have a gift. He'd sat across a table from each of them and their families and told them the same thing. This isn't charity. You're not here because somebody feels sorry for you. You're here because I looked at you and I saw something, and I've got a real good eye, and I'm almost never wrong. Micah, 12. Now taller, was there in a shirt Isaiah had made him tuck in, standing near the car with his hand resting on the fender like his father did. Like he'd earned the right, which he had, because he'd been there for all of it. Camille stood at the back, and she was not the center of the room, and Isaiah watched her notice that, and watched her be glad of it, genuinely glad in a way the woman on the staircase in the red dress could never have understood. She'd changed. Not all at once, and not completely, because people don't, but really. She spent 3 days a week here now. She knew the kids' names. She'd learned to change oil badly, and let a 15-year-old named Deja laugh at her for it, and had laughed too. Her father's letters lived in a frame in her home now, and she'd told Isaiah once quietly that she read them when she felt herself starting to turn back into the old thing, and that they pulled her back every time. When it was time, Isaiah stood up in front of the room next to the car, and the noise died down, and he cleared his throat because public speaking was the one part of any of this that still scared him. "I'm not going to talk long," he said. "Anybody who knows me knows I'd rather be under a car than up in front of one." Laughter. "But I want to tell you why that car's sitting there, and why it's rusted, and why we didn't clean it up because everybody asks." He put his hand on it. 60-some years ago, a man named Augustus Hale built this car. He was one of the smartest men who ever lived, and almost nobody ever knew his name, because the world looked at him and decided he didn't matter. And this car, the best thing he ever made, got hidden away in a rich man's garage under a tarp for decades, because it was easier to bury it than to admit whose it was. And a couple years ago, somebody handed it to me as a joke. He didn't look at Camille. He didn't have to. Everybody in the neighborhood knew the story by now. They thought it was junk, $400 of scrap, charity for the working man, and they laughed. The room was silent. Now here's the thing I need every one of you kids to hear, and I need you to hear it in your bones, not just your ears. Isaiah's voice went rough. They were wrong. That car they laughed at is one of the most valuable, most brilliant machines ever built by human hands. It was worth $9 million, not because somebody dressed it up, not because somebody put a fancy name on it. It was worth all of that the whole time it was sitting rusted under a tarp being called junk. Its value never changed. The only thing that ever changed was whether somebody was willing to look close enough to see it. He looked out at the 22 kids in the front rows. "And that," he said, "is you, every one of you. The world is going to look at you the way that room looked at this car. Like you're scrap. Like you're nothing. Like the best thing anybody can do for you is throw you some charity and have a laugh. And I am here to tell you from the deepest part of me, they are going to be wrong. Same as they were wrong about this car. Same as they were wrong about Augustus Hale. Same as they were wrong about me and my father and my father's father, who rebuilt engines better than any man alive and had to come in the back door for 30 years. His voice cracked, and he let it. Your value doesn't come from whether they see it. Your value is already in you right now, rusted or not, the whole time, whether anybody looks or not. And in this building we are going to teach you the skills to build a life with your hands, but that's not the real thing we're teaching. The real thing we're teaching is how to know your own worth when the whole world is telling you that you don't have any. You learn that, and you can't be thrown away. Not by anybody. Not ever." He stepped back and put his hand flat on the rusted hood one more time. "Augustus Hale signed this car for the ones who come after," he said. "Well, you're the ones who came after. He built it for you. He just didn't know your names yet. Now, let's go to work." The room came apart in applause, not the cruel kind Isaiah had heard in a marble hall 2 years before. Not the sound of people clapping for a dog doing a trick, but the real kind, the kind that comes up out of a room full of people who mean it. Grandmothers on their feet, and kids whooping, and Reggie in the back with tears running down his face, not even trying to wipe them. Camille was crying too quietly at the edge of it where she'd chosen to stand. Brooks, 82 now, and moving slower, gripped the head of his cane with both hands, and beamed like a man watching the meaning of his whole life finally arrive. And Micah crossed the room to his father, and Isaiah pulled his boy in under his arm, and the two of them stood there together in front of the rusted car in the middle of a neighborhood that had gotten its future back. "You did good, Dad," Micah said quietly. "We did good," Isaiah said. "You gave me the rule. Remember, at the breakfast table. If somebody needs a thing and you have it, you give it to them." "Mom's rule. Mom's rule." Isaiah squeezed his son's shoulder. "She'd have liked this. She'd have liked this a whole lot." The Augustus Hale Institute graduated its first class 2 years later. 19 of the original 22 finished a number Isaiah was fiercely quietly proud of, because he'd been told to expect half. Deja, who'd laughed at Camille for not knowing how to change oil, went on to a full apprenticeship at a restoration shop that specialized in exactly the kind of impossible old machines Brooks loved, and she sent Isaiah a photo of her first solo engine rebuild with a caption that just said, "Saw it. Built it. Like you taught me." A boy named Marcus, who'd come in with a juvenile record and a chip on his shoulder the size of the building, was 5 years on, running his own 2-bay garage and teaching a night class at the Institute himself, telling a new batch of throwaway kids the same thing Isaiah had told him. The car never moved. It sat in the center of it all, rusted and magnificent, and thousands of kids over the years walked in the door and saw it first thing and read the little brass plate and learned the story and learned to see themselves in it. Camille Ashford spent the rest of her life spending the heart she'd found she had. She never did put her name on anything again. When she died many years later, an old woman who'd become against every prediction anyone who'd known her at 30 would have made beloved, she left the bulk of the Ashford fortune to the Institute and its expansion into a dozen more neighborhoods in a dozen more cities. And she asked to be remembered not as an Ashford, but simply as a friend of the Hale Institute, which is what her small headstone says to this day. In her will, she left one personal item to Isaiah Turner, her father's letters, the originals he'd once handed her across a workbench. The note with them read, "You gave me back my father. There's no one else on earth I'd trust to keep him." C. And Isaiah Turner, who had been mocked in front of 200 people and had answered not with anger, but with 6 quiet words. "I'd like to look her over." Grew old in the neighborhood he'd saved in the shadow of the institute he'd built, watching class after class of kids the world had thrown away walk out those doors as engineers and mechanics and machinists and people who knew in their bones exactly what they were worth. He never got rich. He'd turned down $10 million in cash on the floor of his own garage, and he never once regretted it, not for a single day. Because he understood something, the whole rest of that marble ballroom had never understood something Augustus Hale had known, and Edward Ashford had learned too late. And Camille had learned just in time, and every kid who came through the Institute learned young enough to be saved by it. The most valuable things in this world are almost never the ones that look valuable. They're the ones sitting rusted under a tarp, waiting, keeping their worth intact, for the one person patient enough, and humble enough, and awake enough to look past what everybody else already decided, and to see. Darius Cole had been that person. No Isaiah Turner had been that person. The mechanic they laughed at. The man they called charity for the working man. And in the end, he was the one who saw what everyone else had thrown away and turned it into the thing that changed everything.